So since starting, I want to say when I first got involved doing or being aware of HIV and AIDS, it was because of people that I was in ministry with at church. And when I say in ministry, not like I was preaching or anything like that, but singing in the choir, growing up in the church, going out on youth outings and trips and things like that. And so in my home church, the person that I sat next to in the section adjacent to me, so I was a soprano and he was a tenor, and I loved his voice. And he kept getting weaker and weaker. And this was in the early 90s that he passed away. I want to say he passed away in 92, 93, around there. And that was also the same time I went to Africa for the first time. And I went to Zimbabwe for a church trip. But so I wanted to really lift up and remember the spirit of these folks that were so deeply involved in church, and at a time where the church was not addressing this pandemic, at a time where we were praying for a whole lot of things and talking about a whole lot of things, but we weren't addressing what was thinning out our choirs and what was changing our church membership. And so this was just a traditional Baptist church in Berkeley, and I remember going through this and wondering, well, what's happening? And he's weaker and he's sick, and all of a sudden he was great today, and now we're wheeling him in a wheelchair. And it just seemed to happen so fast, like really, really fast, around the 1990, 91, 92, and being at that time 13, 14, and not getting it, not understanding, and then years later just having the opportunity to kind of look back and reflect and say, wow, what could we have done, and what would I have done differently. But honestly, I think the innocence of being 13 and 14 or 12 and 13 and not really knowing what was happening didn't change my love for him. It didn't change my embrace or my care or my conversation. It didn't change any of that. And so I remember Philip Johnson and the beautiful voice that he was, and the amazing tenor, and the songs that he would sing that would take so many people to a place of pure joy and happiness. And he, along with David Saunders, who passed years later, were very instrumental in helping me to see HIV and AIDS very clearly in my church, and at two very different times, one passing in the early 90s, and then the other passing in maybe a little after 2001, 2002. And so the secrecy of the first passing and the very robust kind of outward expression of defiance, I will fight this, that came with David's passing. It's just it's an interesting parallel of these two extremes, and how our churches have been forever changed in the conversation. So I just want to say I remember them, and their memory and their spirit will never be forgotten.